Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons in context to the brand new 2024 film by Casey Affleck and Laurence Fishburne and Tomer Capone. And it is the 2024 science fiction film Slingshot. And there are going to be major spoilers for this. This is like a M. Night Shyamalan type film. It's not a film by M. Night Shyamalan. It's an international film. It's definitely worth seeing. I really enjoyed it, but I was surprised that I enjoyed it. We're going to talk about it. And it's really fascinating, and it absolutely has lessons for every dungeon master. So what's the lesson in Slingshot? So first of all, let me explain what Slingshot is. So first of all, Slingshot is the kind of movie I absolutely despise, okay, except for the ending, and we're going to get there, and that's why we're talking about this today, is this does something unique that I think is worth every dungeon master knowing about. So the worst type of stories is any story with an unreliable narrator. Not just me saying that. You'll find 50 videos on YouTube saying people hate any kind of story that has an unreliable narrator, because if what the person is saying to us, telling a story, isn't true, what's it matter? What's the entire thing matter? And almost always when you get these unreliable narrator films, you're like, oh, what happened? I don't know. Like, it must have been all a dream. And you're like, well, what the heck did I waste my time watching a movie about, oh, maybe it was a dream, maybe it wasn't, right? Like, it's a waste of time. So generally, unreliable narrators are a massive waste of time and are a great formula for a terrible story. That was broken. That tradition of unreliable narrator equals suck story is really changed in Slingshot. So I'm going to tell you the story of Slingshot, and I'm going to tell you what we can learn as dungeon masters when we're crafting our narrative. Okay. All right. Because basically and the lesson is, you can use an unreliable narrator if there's absolutely no ambiguity about the end. All right, so here we go. So this film is about, Slingshot is about so this movie is like real hard sci-fi NASA stuff, right? And so basically the Earth is in trouble, and that was kind of boring. They were like, oh, the Earth's in trouble because of environmentalism, blah, blah, blah. It's 1984 and I'm Greta Thunberg. Whatever. You're like, come on, man, ain't nobody listening to that junk anymore. All the trash is going in the same hole. Nobody needs to recycle or eat hummus or drive an electric car. Let's stop pretending, right? But that was a little bit annoying, but, hey, Hollywood environmental checkbox, whatever. Where's your socialism checkbox and your catalyst checkbox? Come on. It's kind of tired, but it was only like 30 seconds of the movie, so I can forgive it. All right, here we go. Let's keep moving. All right, so basically, humanity is going to Titan, right? And they're sending their first astronaut to Titan. Okay, and Titan is a nearby planet where it's similar. It has carbon, and it has oxygen, and it has water, and humans could live there, right? So, hard sci-fi. We're going to send our astronauts out, and we're going to colonize a new planet, right? Interesting concept. I'm definitely down for it. And that's why I saw this. I was like, oh, sci-fi movie? I'm in. Okay, let's do it. I like Laurence Fishburne, right? Casey Affleck, I don't know. We'll see. But Laurence Fishburne, I dig his movies, man. I think I've seen everything he's been in. We're probably about 80-90% of the things he's been in. I'm a major fan, right? So I was like, that's all I need. Laurence Fishburne, science fiction, done, right? I remember Event Horizon, right? So I was like, I was in, right? In like Flynn, right? So this is moving forward, and we get to the point where, so the movie is about this crew of three people: John, Frank, and Nash, right? And it's an engineer, a pilot, and a captain, right? And they all start fighting, and the reason they're fighting is they keep waking up, right, from these hibernation cycles. And these hibernation cycles, the drugs that they use to put them into hibernation, are very powerful and could cause confusion and memory loss. Unreliable narrator, right? So Casey Affleck is coming through this hibernation. Nash is coming through these hibernations, and they're really struggling. Laurence Fishburne, the captain, Frank, he's not having any problems. Actually, I'll you know what? I'll just use the actors' names because it's going to be simpler, right? So Tomer, the engineer, is struggling. Casey, the pilot, is struggling, and Laurence, the captain, is not struggling, right, with these drugs. He's stable, knows what he's doing, right? So, but then the captain beats Nash to death because Nash is considering a mutiny, right? And Casey's like, oh, I don't think that's a good idea, right? And now Casey is like, he doesn't know where Nash is, right? And he has this idea that that Laurence beat Nash to death, right? Beat Tomer to death. That the captain beat the engineer to death, and the pilot is worried about this, okay? And so then the pilot is dealing with the captain, and he's like, oh my gosh, you're like really super cruel, and like I'm not really comfortable dealing with you, and what's happening, right? And there's just this ramp up of these drugs. You know, they keep having to go back in for these hibernations of 3 months, but it's absolutely brutal and it's really rough, right? So what ends up happening, right? Well, at the end, finally, the pilot, Casey's character, John, says, hey, I am not reliably communicating, and I can realize that I think I'm having mental health issues, right? Mental illness, right? And finally, his girlfriend comes on the line, and he's like 600 million miles out, and she's like, listen, this is what's happening. You're not on the actual mission. You are 1,000 feet below the earth in a simulator, and there was a earthquake, and we need you to open the airlock because that's the door that we can save you through. So go out, open the airlock, and then we're going to rescue you from a below ground structure, right? And he's like, well, wait a second, that looks like a real airlock. If I open that airlock, I could just be sucked out into space if this isn't a simulation. And she's like, trust me, it's not, it is a simulation. You're going to be okay. So he opens the door, the airlock, and then he walks out, and there's like 2 minutes of him in an underground tunnel, and here's the banging on the wall, and they're like, you did it, you open up the airlock, look at all the, the infrastructure around you, you're under earth, you're not out in space, and we're about to rescue you, everything's good. And then suddenly, he looks at this light, and the light goes red, and then his perspective shifts, and then he opens his eyes, and he realizes he's being sucked out into space, and he opened the airlock because his mental illness overcame his stability, and he dies, right? And so I watched this whole movie, and I was like, does any of this matter? Is any of this real? And then at the end, they were like, yeah, this matters. The character died because their mental illness was not managed, right? They weren't able to get control of their emotions, get control of their intellect, get control of their spirit, right? They weren't able to be, their mental illness defeated them, and they died being sucked out into open space, and the saliva on their tongue froze, and they died, right? And so there was absolutely no ambiguity, and I think that's the thing that I thought was really interesting and it was a good, and I walked out going, yeah, man, that was a good story. I dug it, right? So I think you can use an unreliable narrator if you answer every question, and at the end, everybody knows the absolute, unmitigated, unequivocated truth, right? That's the lesson for every dungeon master, in my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.